in the heart of Igboland, nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, lay the village of Umueze. Known for its rich soil and bountiful harvests, Umueze was a place where tradition and community thrived. The villagers lived simple lives, their days marked by the rhythm of farming, trading, and celebrating their customs. Among the thatched roof huts and well-worn paths of Umueze, one particular compound stood out. It belonged to Nnamdi and Oluchi, respected elders of the village. Their home was always open to those seeking advice or help, and the couple was known for their wisdom and generosity. However, within this household of virtue lived a young woman whose reputation was quite the opposite. Adanna, the only daughter of Nnamdi and Oluchi, was a sight to behold. At 19 years old, she possessed a beauty that seemed almost otherworldly. Her skin was smooth and dark, gleaming like polished ebony in the sun. Her eyes, large and expressive, sparkled with the mischief of youth. Her hair, when not intricately braided, fell in a cascade of tight curls down her back. Yes, Adanna was beautiful, and she knew it all too well. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the village of Umueze began to stir. Women emerged from their huts, balancing clay pots on their heads as they made their way to the stream. Men gathered their tools, ready for another day of work in the fields. Children rubbed sleep from their eyes, preparing for their morning chores before play could begin. But in the compound of Nnamdi and Oluchi, a different scene unfolded. Oluchi stood outside her daughter's hut, her patience wearing thin. "Adanna," she called, her voice tinged with frustration. "The sun is up, and you're still in bed? Come out and help me prepare the morning meal." From within the hut came a muffled groan, followed by the rustle of cloth. After what seemed like an eternity to Oluchi, the hide covering the doorway was pushed aside, and Adanna emerged, yawning dramatically. "Mother," Adanna said, her voice dripping with disdain, "why must you wake me so early? Don't you know I need my beauty sleep?" Oluchi sighed, shaking her head. "Child, beauty is not just what's on the outside. True beauty comes from a kind heart and willingness to work hard. Now come, there's much to be done." But Adanna merely rolled her eyes and sauntered past her mother, making her way to a small stream that ran behind their compound. There she knelt by the water's edge, gazing at her reflection. As she admired her features, a small smile played on her lips. "Oh, mother," she murmured to herself, "if only you understood. With beauty like mine, why should I need to work? The world will give me everything I desire." As Adanna preened by the stream, the other young women of the village were already hard at work. They ground cassava into flour, prepared stews for the midday meal, and tended to younger siblings. Among them was Chioma, a girl the same age as Adanna, but with a vastly different disposition. Chioma, though not as strikingly beautiful as Adanna, had a warmth about her that drew people in. Her round face was often lit up with a genuine smile, and her hands were calloused from hard work. As she pounded yams for the morning meal, she noticed Adanna still admiring herself by the stream. "Adanna," Chioma called out, her voice friendly despite the underlying exasperation. "Won't you join us? Many hands make light work, you know." Adanna turned, her eyes narrowing as she regarded Chioma and the other women. "Join you," she scoffed. "And ruin my hands with all that rough work? I think not. Besides, shouldn't you be thanking me? My beauty brings honor to our village. Men from far and wide come to Umueze, hoping for a glimpse of me." The other women exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and pity in their eyes. They had long grown accustomed to Adanna's vanity and selfishness, but it never ceased to shock them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the village square came to life. It was market day, and traders from neighboring villages had arrived, their wares spread out on colorful cloths. The air was filled with the sounds of haggling, laughter, and the occasional bleat of a goat or cluck of a chicken. Adanna finally made her way to the market, not to help her trade, but to bask in the attention she knew she would receive. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, adorning herself with her finest beads and rubbing shea butter into her skin until it gleamed. As she walked through the market, her hips swaying with exaggerated grace, heads turned. Young men paused in their conversations, their eyes following her every move. Older women clicked their tongues in disapproval, but Adanna paid them no mind. This was her stage, and she reveled in being the star. Among the crowd, a young farmer named Obinna watched Adanna's procession with a mixture of admiration and nervousness. Obinna was known in the village for his kind heart and hard work. His fields always produced bountiful harvests, which he generously shared with those in need. For months, he had harbored feelings for Adanna, captivated by her beauty but too shy to approach her. Today, Obinna had decided would be different. He had spent the morning gathering the most beautiful wildflowers he could find, arranging them into a bouquet. With a deep breath to steady his nerves, he approached Adanna. Adanna," he stammered, his voice barely audible above the market's din. "I brought these for you. They reminded me of your beauty." Adanna turned, her eyes landing on Obinna and then on the flowers in his outstretched hand. For a moment, something soft flickered in her expression, a glimpse of the kind-hearted girl she could have been. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a cold, mocking smile. "Oh, Obinna," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "Did you really think I would be impressed by some common weeds? I deserve gold and diamonds, not dirt and plants." With a cruel laugh, Adanna snatched the bouquet from Obinna's hands. The crowd in the market fell silent, all eyes on the unfolding scene. Then, with deliberate slowness, Adanna dropped the flowers to the ground and crushed them under her foot. Obinna stood frozen, his face a mask of hurt and humiliation. Around them, people began to whisper, their voices a mix of sympathy for Obinna and disgust at Adanna's behavior. How could she be so cruel? Poor Obinna, he has such a good heart. Beauty on the outside, but ugly on the inside, that one. Adanna, however, seemed oblivious to the whispers. She tossed her head, sending her braids swinging, and continued her walk through the market as if nothing had happened. But the spell of her beauty had been broken. Where before people had looked at her with admiration, now their gazes held judgment and disappointment. As Adanna reached the edge of the market, a gnarled hand suddenly grasped her arm. She turned, ready to berate whoever dared to touch her, but the words died on her lips. Before her stood an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes milky with age. The woman leaned heavily on a walking stick, her other hand still gripping Adanna's arm with surprising strength. "Young woman," the old lady said, her voice creaking like an old door, "you may think your beauty gives you power, but true strength comes from kindness and good character." Adanna tried to pull her arm away, but the old woman's grip was like iron. "What do you know about beauty or strength, you wrinkled old prune?" Adanna spat. "Let go of me and mind your own business." The market fell silent once more, the air suddenly thick with tension. The old woman's eyes, which had seemed clouded with age just moments before, now appeared to clear. They bore into Adanna with an intensity that made the young woman shiver, despite the warm day. "Adanna," the old woman said, her voice now resonating with power, "your heart has become as hard as stone. You have been blessed with beauty, but you use it as a weapon to hurt others. Until you learn to see the beauty in others and show kindness to those around you, your outer beauty will reflect the ugliness within." Before Adanna could respond, a gust of wind swept through the market, kicking up dust and causing everyone to shield their eyes. When the air cleared, the old woman was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of herbs and a tingling in the air. For a moment, Adanna stood rooted to the spot, her heart racing. But then, with a shake of her head, she dismissed the encounter. "Crazy old bat," she muttered, continuing on her way home. That night, as the village settled into darkness, Adanna tossed and turned on her sleeping mat. The old woman's words echoed in her mind, try as she might to forget them. Reflect the ugliness within, she mumbled, turning over once more. What nonsense. I'm the most beautiful girl in Umueze, and nothing will change that. With these thoughts, Adanna finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that her life was about to change dramatically. The next morning, Adanna awoke to the usual sounds of the village coming to life. She stretched languorously, a smile playing on her lips as she thought of the day ahead. There was to be a festival in the neighboring village, and Adanna had every intention of being the center of attention. She reached for the small mirror she kept beside her sleeping mat, eager to begin the process of making herself even more beautiful for the festival. But as she caught sight of her reflection, the mirror slipped from her suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the earthen floor. Where once there had been smooth, flawless skin, Adanna's face was now covered in angry red boils and deep, puckered scars. Her silky hair, her crowning glory, had fallen out in clumps during the night, leaving behind patchy bald spots. For a moment, Adanna could only stare at the broken shards of the mirror, each piece reflecting back her transformed face. Then, a scream tore from her throat, a sound of pure anguish and disbelief. Nendi and Oluchi came running, bursting into their daughter's hut with fear in their eyes. "Adanna, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" Oluchi cried, reaching for her daughter. But Adanna scrambled away, covering her face with her hands. "Don't look at me," she shrieked. "Don't come near me, I'm hideous." Despite Adanna's protests, Oluchi gently pried her daughter's hands away from her face. As she took in Adanna's transformed appearance, a small gasp escaped her lips. Namdi, standing behind his wife, his face etched with concern, asked, "My child, what has happened to you?" Adanna's mind raced, replaying the events of the previous day. Suddenly, the old woman's words came back to her with crystal clarity. It was her. Adanna cried. "That old witch in the market yesterday. She cursed me." Enemy and Oluchi exchanged worried glances. They had heard whispers about their daughter's behavior in the market, how she had humiliated young Obinna and spoken disrespectfully to an elder. Could this truly be a curse, a punishment for Adanna's cruelty? Oluchi, ever the voice of reason, tried to calm her daughter. "Adanna, perhaps this is not a curse but a sign. The gods may be trying to teach you an important lesson about the true nature of beauty." But Adanna was beyond reason. She wailed and thrashed, her cries growing so loud that neighbors began to gather outside, wondering what could be causing such distress in the elder's compound. "Go away," Adanna screamed at her parents. "Leave me alone. I don't want anyone to see me like this." With heavy hearts, Enamdi and Oluchi retreated from their daughter's hut. Outside, they faced the curious and concerned faces of their neighbors. "It's nothing to worry about," Enamdi assured them, his voice steady despite the turmoil he felt inside. "Adanna is not feeling well. She needs rest and privacy." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Oluchi turned to her husband, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Oh, Nendi," she whispered, "what are we going to do? Our daughter's beauty was everything to her. I fear what this may do to her spirit." Nanamdi wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders, his face grave. "We must have faith, my love. Perhaps this is the lesson Adanna has needed all along. We can only pray that she finds the strength to learn from it." Inside her hut, Adanna had curled into a ball on her sleeping mat, her body racked with sobs. Her mind couldn't grasp the reality of what had happened. How could she, the most beautiful girl in Umueze, have been reduced to this? As the day wore on, Adanna refused to leave her hut or allow anyone inside. Oluchi left food and water by the entrance, her heart breaking at the sound of her daughter's continued weeping. In the village, rumors began to spread. Some said Adanna had been struck by a terrible disease. Others whispered that it was indeed a curse, punishment for her years of vanity and cruelty. A few even suggested that the gods themselves had intervened, seeing fit to humble the prideful young woman. Days passed, and Adanna remained hidden away. She spent hours staring at the shards of her broken mirror, hoping against hope that her reflection would change, that her beauty would somehow be restored. But each time she was met with the same scarred and boil-covered face, the same patchy, balding head. As Adanna wallowed in her misery, life in the village continued. From her self-imposed prison, she could hear the sounds of daily life: children laughing as they played, women chatting as they worked, men returning from the fields with songs on their lips. For the first time, Adanna began to realize how much of life she had missed in her obsession with her own beauty. One afternoon, about a week after her transformation, Adanna's self-pity was interrupted by a commotion outside. Curious despite herself, she crept to the entrance of her hut and peered out, careful to keep her face hidden. She saw a crowd gathering, their faces etched with worry. In the center stood Nkechi, a woman Adanna had often been particularly cruel to in the past. Nkechi was wailing, her voice filled with desperation. "My son," she cried. "My little Chidi has fallen into the river. He can't swim. Someone, please help." Adanna watched as the villagers looked at each other helplessly. The river's current was strong, and many couldn't swim themselves. Those who could were hesitating, afraid of the river's power. In that moment, something stirred in Adanna's heart. Without thinking, she grabbed a piece of cloth to cover her face and ran out of her hut towards the river. She ignored the gasps and startled cries as people recognized her, focusing only on the small figure struggling in the water. When she reached the riverbank, Adanna didn't hesitate. She dove into the water, her strong arms cutting through the current. The river fought against her, trying to pull her under, but Adanna was determined. She reached the boy, Chidi, and wrapped one arm around him. "Hold on to me," she gasped, and felt the boy's small arms encircle her neck. The swim back to shore was grueling. Adanna's lungs burned, and her muscles screamed in protest. But she didn't give up. With one final push, she felt her feet touch the river. Hands reached out from the shore, pulling her and Chidi to safety. As they reached dry land, Adanna collapsed on the ground, coughing and gasping for air. She was vaguely aware of Nkechi scooping up Chidi, holding him close and crying tears of relief. Then, suddenly, Adanna felt arms around her. She looked up to see Nkechi embracing her, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you," Nkechi sobbed. "You saved my son's life. Thank you, thank you." It was then that Adanna realized the cloth covering her face had come off in the water. She tensed, waiting for Nkechi to recoil in horror at her appearance, but the moment never came. Nkechi continued to hold her, gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time since her transformation, Adanna felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with physical beauty. She had helped someone, saved a life, and the feeling. The sun rose over Umueze, its golden rays painting the thatched roofs of the village in warm hues. As the cockerels crowed and the early risers began their day, a palpable shift hung in the air. The village was abuzz with whispers and speculation, all centered around one person, Adanna. The tale of Adanna's bravery in saving young Chidi from the river had spread like wildfire. For a community that had grown accustomed to Adanna's vanity and cruelty, this act of selflessness was nothing short of miraculous. Yet mixed with the admiration was curiosity and, for some, skepticism. Could the village's most notorious beauty truly have changed overnight? In her small hut, Adanna stirred from a fitful sleep. The events of the previous day played through her mind like a vivid dream. She remembered the rush of the river, the weight of Chidi in her arms, and most strikingly, the genuine gratitude in Nkechi's eyes. It was a feeling unlike anything she had experienced before. Slowly, Adanna sat up on her sleeping mat, her hand instinctively reaching for her face. The boils and scars were still there, a constant reminder of her transformation. But for the first time since that fateful morning, Adanna didn't immediately recoil at her own touch. A soft voice called from outside the hut. "Adanna, are you awake, my child?" It was Oluchi, Adanna's mother. In the days since Adanna's transformation, Oluchi had been a constant presence, leaving food and water by the hut's entrance, speaking words of comfort through the hide covering. Now, her voice held a note of hope that had been absent for so long. "Yes, Mother," Adanna replied, her voice hoarse from disuse. You can come in." The hide rustled as Oluchi entered, her eyes widening slightly as she took in her daughter's appearance in the morning light. But to Adanna's surprise, her mother's gaze held no disgust, only love and a tinge of sadness. "Oh, my daughter," Oluchi said softly, kneeling beside Adanna. "You were so brave yesterday. The entire village is talking about how you saved Chidi." Adanna looked down, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. I don't know what came over me," she admitted. "I just couldn't bear the thought of that little boy drowning." Oluchi reached out, gently lifting Adanna's chin so their eyes met. "That, my dear, is the beauty that has always been inside you. It just needed a chance to shine through." For a moment, Adanna was silent, letting her mother's words sink in. Then, to both their surprise, she burst into tears. All the fear, shame, and confusion of the past days came pouring out as Oluchi held her, stroking her back as she hadn't done since Adanna was a small child. As Adanna's sobs subsided, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Mother," she said hesitantly, I think I want to go outside today." Oluchi's face lit up with a warm smile. "Of course, my dear, whenever you're ready." With trembling hands, Adanna prepared herself to face the village. She no longer had her fine clothes or jewelry to hide behind, no silky hair to arrange perfectly. Instead, she donned a simple wrapper and headscarf, taking a deep breath before stepping out of the hut. The sunlight felt foreign on her skin after days of seclusion. As Adanna's eyes adjusted, she became aware of the stares and whispers around her. Villagers paused in their morning tasks, some pointing, others quickly averting their gaze when she looked their way. Adanna felt her resolve wavering, the urge to run back into the safety of her hut nearly overwhelming. But then she heard a small voice call out, "Adanna! Adanna!" It was Chidi, running towards her with a wide smile on his face. Before Adanna could react, the little boy had thrown his arms around her waist in a tight hug. "Thank you for saving me," Chidi said, looking up at her with pure adoration. "You're my hero." Adanna felt tears pricking at her eyes again, but this time they were accompanied by a warmth spreading through her chest. She knelt down, bringing herself to Chidi's level. "You're very welcome, Chidi," she said softly. "I'm just glad you're safe." As she stood back up, Adanna noticed Nkechi approaching, a basket balanced on her hip. The woman who Adanna had once treated with such disdain now looked at her with genuine warmth. "Adanna," Nkechi said, "I was just heading to the stream to wash some clothes. Would you like to join me?" The old Adanna would have scoffed at the idea of doing such menial labor. But now, looking at Nkechi's kind face and feeling the lingering warmth of Chidi's hug, Adanna found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she said, "though I'm afraid I don't know much about washing clothes." Nkechi's laugh was like a bubbling stream. "Well, it's never too late to learn." As they walked to the stream, Adanna became acutely aware of the stares following them. She could hear the murmurs, some kind, others less so. "Look at her face. She saved that boy, you know. But she was so cruel before. People don't change that easily." Nkechi must have sensed Adanna's discomfort. As they reached the stream's edge, she turned to Adanna with a conspiratorial smile. "You know," she said in a stage whisper, "I've always thought that those who gossip the most have the least interesting lives of their own." Despite herself, Adanna felt a chuckle escape her lips. It was a foreign sound, one she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. As Nkechi taught Adanna the proper way to wash clothes in the stream, other women began to join them. At first there was an awkward tension, years of Adanna's past behavior creating an invisible barrier. But as the morning wore on, that barrier began to crumble. Adanna listened intently as the women talked about their lives, the challenges of raising children, the joy of a good harvest, the excitement of upcoming festivals. For the first time, she found herself genuinely interested in others' experiences. When it came time to wring out the heavy, wet clothes, Adanna's soft hands struggled with the task. Her arms, unused to such labor, quickly began to ache, but instead of complaining or giving up, she gritted her teeth and kept at it. Chioma, the girl who had once invited Adanna to join in the work, noticed her struggle. Without a word, she moved next to Adanna and began to help, showing her a technique that made the task easier. "Thank you," Adanna said softly, meeting Chioma's eyes. Chioma nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "We all had to learn once," she said. "The secret is to not be afraid to ask for help when you need it." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, signaling the approach of midday, the women gathered their now clean clothes and prepared to head back to the village. Adanna's arms ached and her back was sore from bending over the stream, but she felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. Adanna and Nkechi called as they walked back. "Some of us gather in the evenings to teach the younger children to read and write. Would you like to join us?" Adanna hesitated. She had always prided herself on her intelligence, but the thought of facing more villagers, especially impressionable children, made her nervous. I'm not sure I'd be very good at teaching," she admitted. Chioma, walking nearby, chimed in. "You don't have to teach right away. You could just help out, maybe listen to the children read. Sometimes all they need is someone to pay attention." The idea of being useful, of contributing something meaningful, tugged at Adanna's heart. Slowly she nodded. "All right," she said, "I'll come." That evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, Adanna made her way to the communal area where the lessons were held. Children sat in small groups, some with simple slates and chalk, others with worn books passed down through generations. As Adanna approached, the chatter among the children died down, replaced by wide-eyed stares and hushed whispers. She felt her steps falter, the old urge to run and hide rising within her. But then she saw Chidi, waving enthusiastically from his spot in the circle. "Adanna, come sit by me," he called out. With a grateful smile, Adanna made her way to Chidi's side, settling down on the ground beside him. The little boy immediately thrust his book into her hands. "Can you help me with this word?" he asked, pointing to a particularly long term. As Adanna leaned in to help Chidi sound out the word, she felt the tension in the air begin to dissipate. Other children, curiosity overcoming their initial wariness, began to scoot closer, asking for help with their own reading and writing. Hours passed, and Adanna found herself lost in the world of stories and letters. She helped younger children form their first words, listened as older ones read aloud, and even shared some of the tales she remembered from her own childhood. As the lesson came to an end and parents arrived to collect their children, Adanna was surprised to find herself surrounded by small voices saying "thank you" and "will you come back tomorrow?" Nkechi, who had been overseeing the lesson, approached Adanna with a warm smile. "You have a gift," she said. "The children responded so well to you." Adanna felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. "I enjoyed it more than I expected," she admitted. As she walked home that night, Adanna's mind was a whirl with the events of the day. The ache in her muscles from the morning's work, the sound of children's laughter, the feeling of being part of something larger than herself. It was all so new, yet somehow felt right. Days turned into weeks, and Adanna fell into a new rhythm of life. Each morning she would join the women at the stream or in the communal gardens, learning the tasks she had once considered beneath her. In the afternoons she would help her mother prepare meals or assist elders with small chores around their compounds, and in the evenings she never missed a lesson with the children. Slowly but surely, the villagers' perception of Adanna began to shift. The whispers of judgment were replaced by words of admiration for her hard work and kindness. Children would run up to her in the market, excited to show off a new word they had learned. Elders who had once shaken their heads at her behavior now offered warm smiles and words of wisdom. But the path to redemption was not without its challenges. There were days when the memory of her former beauty would hit Adanna hard, leaving her in tears. Times when a careless word or a lingering stare would send her retreating into herself, doubting the progress she had made. It was during one such moment of doubt that Adanna found herself wandering to the outskirts of the village, seeking solitude. As she walked, lost in thought, she nearly collided with someone coming from the opposite direction. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going," Adanna apologized, looking up to see who she had almost run into. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized it was Obinna, the young farmer whose flowers she had so cruelly destroyed that day in the market. The day that had set this whole transformation in motion. Obinna looked equally startled, his eyes widening as he recognized Adanna. For a moment they stood in awkward silence, the weight of their last encounter hanging heavily between them. Finally, Adanna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Obinna, I owe you an apology. The way I treated you that day in the market was inexcusable. I was cruel and thoughtless, and I'm truly sorry." Obinna's expression softened, a mix of surprise and something else, perhaps hope, flickering in his eyes. "Adanna," he said gently, "I've seen how you've changed. The whole village has. Your kindness to the children, your willingness to help others, it hasn't gone unnoticed." Adanna felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But how can you forgive me so easily?" she asked. "After what I did." Obinna was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you know why I brought you those flowers that day?" When Adanna shook her head, he continued, "It wasn't just because of your physical beauty. I had watched you for months, hoping to see a glimpse of the kind person I believed was hiding beneath the surface. Those flowers were meant to coax that person out." He smiled softly. "And now, here you are. Perhaps not in the way either of us expected, but you're here all the same." Adanna was speechless, touched by Obinna's words and the sincerity behind them. As they stood there, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the village, Adanna felt something shift within her. It was as if the last piece of her old self was finally falling away, making room for the person she was becoming. From that day forward, Adanna and Obinna began to form a friendship unlike any Adanna had ever known. It wasn't based on flattery or appearances, but on genuine respect and shared values. Obinna introduced Adanna to the wonders of farming, teaching her about different crops in the cycles of planting and harvesting. Adanna, in turn, shared with him the joy she had discovered in teaching, often discussing the progress of her young students. As the seasons changed, so did Adanna, both inside and out. The angry boils that had covered her face began to fade, leaving behind smooth skin that, while not as flawless as before, held a new kind of beauty. Her hair, once fallen out in clumps, started to grow back, thicker and more lustrous than ever. But more importantly, Adanna's heart had transformed. The girl who had once cared only for her own reflection now found her greatest joy in helping others. Her laugh, once rare and often at others' expense, became a common sound in the village, warm and genuine. One evening, as Adanna was helping her mother prepare dinner, Oluchi paused in her work, regarding her daughter with tears in her eyes. "What is it, Mother?" Adanna asked, concerned. Oluchi shook her head, smiling through her tears. "Oh, my daughter," she said, "I always knew there was goodness in you. But seeing you now, the woman you've become, it fills my heart with more joy than I can express." Adanna felt her own eyes welling up as she embraced her mother. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find this path," she whispered. Oluchi pulled back, cupping Adanna's face in her hands. "The journey is different for everyone, my child. What matters is that you found your way." As the village prepared for the annual harvest festival, Adanna threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm. She helped weave decorations from palm fronds, assisted in preparing the communal feast, and even worked with the children to prepare a special performance for the celebration. The day of the festival arrived, and Umueze was alive with color and music. As Adanna moved through the crowd, helping where she could and laughing with friends, she caught sight of her reflection in a polished copper pot. The face that looked back at her was not the flawless beauty she had once been, but neither was it the scarred and boil-covered visage that had first greeted her after the curse. Instead, she saw a face marked by laughter lines and sun-kissed from days spent working outdoors. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, now shone with warmth and compassion. For the first time since her transformation, Adanna truly saw herself, not just her outer appearance but the person she had become, and she found that she liked what she saw. As the festival reached its peak, with dancing and music filling the air, Adanna felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see the village elder, a man so old that some said he remembered when the first hut in Umueze was built. "Adanna," the elder said, his voice creaking with age but his eyes sharp and clear, "the Council of Elders has been watching you these past months. We have seen the change in you, the good you have brought to our village." Adanna listened, her heart racing, unsure where this was leading. The elder continued, "We would like to offer you a position as a teacher in our village school. Your work with the children has not gone unnoticed, and we believe you have much to offer the next generation." Adanna felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. She, who had once been the village's shame, was now being offered. The gentle breeze of the Harmattan season swept through Umueze, carrying with it the scent of ripe mangoes and the promise of change. As the village stirred to life in the early morning light, Adanna stood at the entrance of her family's compound, her heart full of anticipation and a touch of nervousness. Today marked her first official day as a teacher in the village school. The position offered to her by the Council of Elders had come as a surprise, but it felt right, like the culmination of all the changes she had undergone in the past months. As Adanna made her way through the village, she was greeted by warm smiles and cheerful calls. Children ran up to her, excited for their lessons, while parents nodded respectfully. It was a far cry from the whispers and averted gazes that had once followed her every move. The school was a simple structure, built of mud bricks with a thatched roof, but to Adanna it felt like a palace of knowledge. As she stepped inside, the chatter of the children quieted, all eyes turning to her expectantly. Taking a deep breath, Adanna smiled at her students. "Good morning, children," she began, her voice clear and confident. Today we're going to embark on a journey together, a journey through words and numbers, through stories of our past and dreams of our future. As the lesson progressed, Adanna found herself falling into a rhythm. She guided the younger children through their letters, encouraged the older ones in their reading, and wove in stories and songs to keep everyone engaged. The hours flew by, and before she knew it, the school day had come to an end. As the children filed out, chattering excitedly about what they had learned, Adanna felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Obinna leaning against the door frame, a warm smile on his face. "That was quite a performance," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I think you found your calling, Adanna." Adanna felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a sensation that had become increasingly common in Obinna's presence. "Thank you," she replied softly. "It feels good to be doing something meaningful." Obinna stepped into the classroom, his gaze never leaving Adanna's face. "I was wondering," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "if you might like to take a walk with me? I've just harvested some mangoes from my orchard, and I thought we could share them while watching the sunset." Adanna's heart skipped a beat. She and Obinna had grown close over the past months, their friendship deepening with each passing day. But there had always been an unspoken something between them, a potential for more that neither had yet dared to explore. "I'd like that very much," Adanna replied, her smile mirroring Obinna's own. As they walked through the village towards Obinna's farm, Adanna was acutely aware of the glances and smiles cast their way. It seemed the entire village had been watching their budding relationship with keen interest. They reached Obinna's mango orchard just as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Obinna spread out a woven mat beneath one of the trees, and they sat side by side, the sweet aroma of ripe mangoes filling the air. As they shared the fruit, juice dripping down their chins and laughter bubbling between them, Adanna felt a sense of contentment she had never known before. Here, with Obinna, she didn't have to pretend or put on airs. She could simply be herself. "Adanna," Obinna said softly, his voice taking on a serious tone, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a while now." Adanna's heart raced as she turned to face him. "Yes, Obinna." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I've watched you transform over these past months, not just on the outside, but on the inside too. The kindness, the compassion, the joy you bring to others, it's always been a part of you, but now it shines so brightly." Obinna reached out, gently taking Adanna's hand in his. "What I'm trying to say is, I love you, Adanna. Not for your beauty, though you are beautiful to me in every way. I love you for your heart, for the person you've become and the person you continue to grow into each day." Tears welled up in Adanna's eyes, but they were tears of joy. For so long she had believed that love was something that could only be earned through physical beauty. But here was Obinna, offering her a love based on something far deeper and more lasting. "Oh, Obinna," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too. You've seen me at my worst and my best, and you've stood by me through it all. You've helped me become the person I am today." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky, Adanna and Obinna shared their first kiss. It was sweet and tender, a promise of the love and partnership that lay ahead of them. News of Adanna and Obinna's courtship spread quickly through Umueze. Many in the village saw it as a fitting culmination of Adanna's journey, a testament to the power of change and the triumph of inner beauty over mere appearances. In the weeks that followed, Adanna found herself busier than ever. Her days were filled with teaching at the school, while her evenings were often spent with Obinna, learning about farming and discussing their hopes for the future. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the village, Obinna surprised Adanna by leading her to the central square. There, to her astonishment, she found the entire village gathered, including her parents and the council of elders. Obinna turned to face her, his eyes shining with love and determination. "Adanna," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "from the moment I first saw the true you emerging, I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" A collective gasp went up from the villagers, followed by an expectant silence. Adanna felt tears of joy spilling down her cheeks as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Yes, she finally managed to say. Yes, Obinna, I will marry you. The square erupted in cheers and ululations. Adanna found herself swept up in embraces, first Obinna's, then her parents, and soon it seemed the entire village wanted to offer their congratulations. As the impromptu celebration continued around them, Adanna caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd. It was the old woman from the market, the one whose words had set Adanna's transformation in motion. The woman's eyes met Adanna's, and she gave a small, knowing smile before disappearing into the crowd. The weeks leading up to Adanna and Obinna's traditional wedding were a flurry of activity. The entire village came together to help with the preparations, each person contributing what they could. Women gathered to prepare special dishes, men worked on constructing a new hut for the couple, and children practiced songs and dances for the celebration. On the morning of the wedding, Adanna sat in her mother's hut as Oluchi and other women of the village helped her prepare. As they rubbed her skin with shea butter and adorned her with beads and cowries, Adanna caught sight of her reflection in a polished metal tray. The face that looked back at her was not the one she had once prized above all else, nor was it the scarred visage that had first greeted her after the curse. Instead, she saw a woman whose beauty radiated from within, her eyes bright with joy, her smile genuine and warm. "You look beautiful," my daughter Oluchi said, her voice thick with emotion. "But more importantly, you are beautiful. Your kindness, your strength, your love for others, these are the things that truly make you shine." As Adanna stepped out of the hut, a hush fell over the gathered crowd. Then, slowly, a song began to rise, not the traditional wedding songs, but a new one, composed by the village children in honor of their beloved teacher. The song told the story of a girl who learned that true beauty comes from the heart, of a woman who found strength in kindness and love in unexpected places. As Adanna walked towards Obinna, who waited for her with eyes full of love and admiration, she felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The ceremony was a joyous blend of tradition and the new spirit that Adanna and Obinna represented. Vows were exchanged, blessings were given, and as the sun began to set, the newlyweds were led to their new home amidst cheers and well wishes. As they crossed the threshold of their hut, Obinna turned to Adanna, taking both her hands in his. "My love," he said softly, "today marks the beginning of our journey together. I promise to stand by you, to support your dreams, and to love you more deeply with each passing day." Adanna felt tears of joy welling up in her eyes. "And I promise you, Obinna, to be your partner in all things, to face life's challenges by your side, to celebrate our joys together, and to always strive to be the best version of myself, the person you've helped me become." Their life together was one of hard work, love, and continuous growth. Adanna continued to teach at the village school, her passion for education growing with each passing year. Obinna's farm flourished under their combined efforts, and soon they were known not just in Umueze but in surrounding villages as well for their bountiful harvests and innovative farming techniques. As the seasons changed and years passed, Adanna and Obinna were blessed with children of their own. First came a daughter, whom they named Oluchi after Adanna's mother. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Nnamdi, named for Adanna's father. Adanna approached motherhood with the same dedication and love she brought to everything in her new life. She was determined to raise her children with the values she had learned through her own journey: kindness, empathy, and the importance of inner beauty. One evening, as the family sat around the fire after dinner, young Oluchi climbed into Adanna's lap. "Mama," she said, her eyes wide with curiosity, "tell us a story." Adanna smiled, looking around at her loving family. Obinna caught her eye and nodded encouragingly, knowing the story she was about to tell. "Once upon a time," Adanna began, her voice soft but clear, "in this very village, there lived a girl who thought beauty was everything." As she recounted her own story, carefully adapted for young ears, Adanna marveled at how far she had come. The selfish, vain girl she had once been seemed like a stranger now, a cautionary tale rather than a lived experience. When she finished the story, little Nnamdi piped up, "But Mama, what happened to the girl? Did she stay ugly forever?" Adanna chuckled, ruffling her son's hair. "No, my dear. She learned that true beauty comes from kindness, from helping others, from loving with an open heart, and when she learned that, she became more beautiful than she had ever been before." Oluchi, always perceptive, looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mama," she said slowly, "is that girl you?" Adanna exchanged a glance with Obinna, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, my love," Adanna replied. "That girl was me, a long time ago, and every day I'm thankful for the lesson I learned." As the children peppered her with questions, Adanna patiently explained the importance of valuing inner beauty over outward appearances, of treating others with kindness, and of always striving to be the best version of oneself. The years continued to pass, and Adanna watched with pride as her children grew into kind, compassionate individuals. Oluchi showed a talent for healing and began apprenticing with the village herbalist. Nnamdi, like his father, had a gift for farming and was always eager to learn new techniques to improve their harvests. Adanna's influence extended far beyond her immediate family. The students she had taught over the years went on to become leaders in Umueze and neighboring villages. They carried with them the lessons of kindness, empathy, and the value of education that Adanna had instilled in them. As Adanna and Obinna entered their golden years, they found themselves surrounded by a large, loving extended family. Their home was always filled with the laughter of grandchildren, the chatter of former students coming to seek advice, and the warm conversations of friends gathered to share a meal. One quiet evening, as Adanna and Obinna sat outside their hut watching the sunset, Obinna turned to his wife with a tender smile. "My love," he said, taking her hand in his, "do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if you hadn't gone through your transformation?" Adanna was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but then I look at our beautiful family, at the life we've built together, at all the lives we've touched, and I'm grateful for every step of the journey that brought us here." Obinna squeezed her hand gently. "You've always been beautiful to me, Adanna, but watching you grow into the woman you are today, that has been the greatest gift of my life." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Adanna leaned her head on Obinna's shoulder. She felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude wash over her. The story of Adanna's transformation had long since become a beloved tale in Umueze and beyond. Parents told it to their children as a lesson in the true nature of beauty and the power of kindness. Teachers used it to encourage their students to look beyond appearances and value character above all. But for Adanna, it was more than just a story. It was a reminder of how far she had come, of the lessons she had learned, and of the love that had blossomed from adversity. As darkness fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Adanna and Obinna made their way back into their hut. The sounds of the village settling down for the night surrounded them, children being called in for bed, the distant lowing of cattle, the gentle rustling of palm fronds in the breeze. Adanna paused at the threshold, looking back at the village that had seen her at her worst and her best. She silently thanked the old woman whose curse had turned out to be the greatest blessing of her life. Inside, as they prepared for bed, Adanna caught sight of herself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. The face that looked back at her was lined with age, her hair streaked with gray. But her eyes sparkled with a light that had only grown brighter over the years, the light of love, wisdom, and inner beauty. As she lay down beside Obinna, Adanna's heart was full. She had learned that true beauty was not something you could see in a mirror, it was something you carried in your heart and shared with the world through your actions. And so, in the village of Umueze, the tale of Adanna's redemption became more than just a story. It became a legacy, a testament to the transformative power of love, kindness, and self-discovery. It served as a reminder to all who heard it that it's never too late to change, to grow, and to discover the beauty that lies within each of us. As the years passed and Adanna and Obinna's hair turned white, their influence on the village only grew. They were revered as elders, sought out for their wisdom and compassion. The school where Adanna had taught for so many years was renamed in her honor, a tribute to her dedication to education and personal growth. Their children, Oluchi and Nnamdi, had grown into respected adults with families of their own. Oluchi had become the village's head healer, combining traditional remedies with new medical knowledge she had sought out from traveling doctors. Nnamdi had taken over the family farm, implementing innovative techniques that made their harvest the envy of the region. One bright morning, as Adanna sat outside her hut enjoying the warmth of the sun on her aged skin, she noticed a commotion at the edge of the village. a group of strangers was approaching, led by a young woman who looked vaguely familiar. As they drew closer, Adanna realized why the woman seemed familiar. She bore a striking resemblance to Adanna herself in her youth, before her transformation. The young woman's beauty was undeniable, but there was a hardness in her eyes, a haughtiness in her bearing that Adanna recognized all too well. The group stopped before Adanna, and the young woman stepped forward. "Are you the one they call Adanna?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "The one from the story?" Adanna nodded, her eyes twinkling. "I am," she replied simply. "And who might you be, my dear?" The young woman drew herself up proudly. "I am Izin, from the village of Ugwu. I've come because I need your help." Over the next hour, Izin's story unfolded. She